Mr. Mapaila, thanks for your time on the lead this afternoon. When the President consulted you as the SACP about the changes, did you have any reservations?
It's a courtesy process, Clement. We can't have reservations. The bottom line is that he's able to articulate the basis upon which he's taken particular steps. You will know that this was quite drastic, 10 changes overall, massive stuff. But we understood that it's strengthening the capacity of government and its ability to deliver services to our people and to implement its own programs. So that was much welcome by us. And of course, his response, which he also gave to the public about the restructuring in the security cluster, particularly bringing intelligence into his office, was also articulated, presented well. We appreciated that intervention. We believe that it is important that there's accountability, there's effectiveness in the state. And I think that he's committed to building a capable, developmental, democratic state. But at the same time, we felt that it is important that particularly the economic sector and the new finance minister should be able to articulate and align properly our macroeconomic framework that will eliminate the colonial legacy of apartheid and skewed industrial development in our country, and embed the new focus of our economy on industrialization as a key tenet of national production and development. So we appreciate all of these interventions. You know, we've been stuck in a particular moment, and we want to also thank Comrade Tito for his service. He came in at a very, very difficult time. He was a soldier on call. He responded quite well. We may have differed with him there and there, but quite clearly the collective that he has brought about, it's quite promising that they will give more oomph and impetus onto the government to implement its programs.
Yeah, and what expectations do you have of Enoch Kotongwana? You've mentioned what he needs to implement, and I'm just thinking sometimes that responsibility doesn't lie solely with him. Yes, he is the implementing agent, he's the political head, but if the ANC doesn't move on some of the policy proposals that you discuss as alliance, you can't necessarily put that blame on the Minister of Finance. The ANC must be the one that moves and implements so that their deployees in government can see through those decisions.
Well, the basic thing we can ask Comrade Kotongwana to do at the apex of our economic policy through the Treasury is to implement the agreed ANC manifesto. That's simple. So if he does that and not be selective that this one is not good because it doesn't sit well with the markets or with the rating agencies, then we will surely enter into a battle which will be unnecessary. I think it's critical that everyone in government appreciate the conditions our people are living under, the deepening levels of poverty in an extremely wealthy country on the African continent, and that we can turn around things if we collectively implement the decisions that were well taken long ago. I think that's the biggest thing. The issue has been inability to implement agreed decisions, and that has been the source of problems. I mean, every other thing that sometimes we have argued about in public, it's there agreed on ANC policy document. But sometimes people can choose only conservative sections of the policies and make them strategic policies, forgetting that a movement like ours in a developing country like South Africa, which is elected into office, is judged by how it responds to the poorest in a society. So not much about how you service the rich. So that balancing act will become critical for the new minister, particularly in the alignment of macroeconomic framework that is responsive to the people in the villages, in the township, and other parts of the country, so that South Africa is not just about Gauteng or Johannesburg, it's about the rest of the country. And I think that it's a high time that government ministers begin to think broadly about how to improve the conditions of our people and to speed up the pace of interventions and programs that are there to empower the masses.
Yeah, when the president came in, he promised that he would be cutting the fat. He promised a leaner cabinet when he came into office, but he hasn't really done that a couple of years later.
Well, he has done that. I mean, there's no doubt from the beginning, the ministries were reduced and so forth. I think that also South Africans, including analysts, have to contextualize our country and its challenges as well as other countries. For instance, in the US and let's say Britain, you can run government on autopilot. They've had centuries of developing systems and government. So they are much easier on implementation. In our case, you need men and women on the ground for oversight, for direct leadership, and so forth. So it's quite different. But nonetheless, we are still committed. You will know we had initially proposed that we could have less than 15 ministers overall as the SACP. But we are appreciating the fact that gradually it's going there to reduce the number of ministries. But it should not just be an obsession. The issue will be whether the teams that are put in place will respond to the current challenges that we face.
But there must be obsession, I would argue, Mr. Mapaila, especially when you have so many soldiers on the ground who sometimes are not fit for purpose. I mean, the many ministries that we have, the ministers we've had occupying those departments, how has it served us sufficiently as South Africans? They have been a cost to the state, and when you look at some of the ministries, you can do away. When you look at the role of deputy ministers, you can't argue that they play a much significant role.
Well, I think it's the task of the media to explain this to the public. The deputy ministers plays an important role in preparing many executive decisions that are taken by ministers as well as cabinet. They participate in cabinet committees and so forth. Those processes, and also given the fact that we have a dual system in South Africa where we've got Cape Town and Pretoria. And the number of days that ministers have to focus on ministerial work, it's quite different. So all of those things come into being. But nonetheless, the issue is that they can be reduced. That we agree. But I think most of the reasoning for their reduction is not quite sufficient for some of us. But nonetheless, the bottom line is that they can be reduced, but they do play a critical role. It's established in the Constitution. That is why, for instance, a deputy minister is not acting when a minister is not, that they deputize is not available because they are not ministers. They are deputy ministers. It's important, perhaps, that maybe a debate could be created to talk about that particular issue. But nonetheless, I think that we have agreed on the principle of reduction and so forth, so that we don't spend too much resources in administration and PACs, but we focus on the implementation of the programs. I do think that for me, while it is a critical issue, that's a peripheral issue given the challenges that we face as a country, and even how we can avoid a lot of wastage in many other areas in different spheres of government. That should be one of the key focus. In fact, we have stressed also to these new ministers that they must never be corrupt. They must forget about ever touching the till of the people of South Africa. We will deal with them. They will confront us head on once they start doing that. So it's important as we welcome them to say, serve the people wholeheartedly, selflessly, no personal interest. You can develop as you are in this particular position. It's a rare privilege to be appointed a minister or a deputy minister in any country.
Yeah. Do you think there was enough consequence management, Mr. Mapaila, for the failures of our security cluster in the recent unrest? Bheki Cele remains in the police ministry. Ayanda Dlodlo has been moved to another portfolio. You've got the defense minister who will apparently be given another position.
Yeah, I think, firstly, I agree with the issue that there need to be consequent management on a number of key areas. But again, let's take Comrade Bheki Cele. I think if you want one of the foremost warriors against criminality and crime in our country it's Minister Cele. In fact, instead of commending him for the work that he has been doing, we looked into one particular mistake and elevated it into a strategic mistake. And I think that he continues to do a good job, but we have got departments. We've got, let's say in the police, we've got commissioners, we've got DGs across the board. These are the people that are operational. The ministers provide a policy direction, effective intervention, but on the basis of available information. For instance, I will understand that even when there was this squabble that was highlighted largely in the media about Minister George and Cele, one who says, no, we forwarded information, the other said we didn't receive information. It's not much about the two as individuals who have said we are providing a file. They're talking about operational systems. So it is the operational system that are weakened, that need to be improved. That is why we welcome the presidency, the president taking the state security into his office. So we believe that they need to be prepped up. In fact, one major thing that needs to be debated in the ministries.
Yeah. Just lastly, Mr. Mapaila, we're out of time, but I want to get your thoughts on the issue around Zweli Mkhize. I'm sure the SACP, just like many other South Africans, were disappointed and outraged by the details around Digital Vibes, that scandal, and how Zweli Mkhize's family has benefited. The president didn't even mention that yesterday, only thanked Mkhize for his outstanding leadership despite having read that SIU report and understanding the extent of how corrupt that contract was and how the minister's family benefited. Was that a missed opportunity on the president to take a strong stance and speak of government's position against corruption?
Government position against corruption, and I think this president has shown his commitment to fight against corruption. I think it's quite unfortunate with Comrade Zweli, who did very well as Minister of Health, particularly in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and led our country quite well. It's really, really unfortunate that such a thing happened. We had expressed our view as the SACP regarding this about all aspects that deals with corruption, that action must be taken. As for the president, I think he has in him as president to thank a minister who gave good service to his country. And the other issues, the SIU matter, for instance, if you read his letter of resignation, he does indicate to the extent that he's taken up this matter. So therefore, the president perhaps could have been refrained by premature statements based on what he says is the process that he wants to undertake to clear his name. And we wish him well, but he has done very well for the country. On the one hand, we have said law institutions must take their course against any other form of corruption, against anyone, irrespective of their stature in society.
Yeah, well, the president did promise, and thank you, the president promised that he will report back to South Africans, and he's read the SIU report. So South Africans are expecting him to at least report back. Thank you for making time, Mapaila, the SACP's first Deputy General Secretary.